Guardsman is my character concept. Male. Let's see here. Kind of young. Anything else I should throw in there? Alright, well. Let's see here. Let's make him nerdy. Alright. Now then, let's crack open the book and look at the stats. So the stats are WS for weapon skill, DS for ballistic skill, S for strength, T for toughness, AG for agility, INT for intelligence. This is perception and willpower. Let's open up my dice roller. I have a name for my character, so let's just call him Nerdy Guardsman for now. Use an acolyte, because we're using the Dh2e system. Alright. So, now that I have made a character sheet, let's just dunk that down. Oh right, I missed a couple stats. Fellowship and influence. Kind of like having the in there. Okay. So then, the core mechanic for Dh2e is that you roll a D100 and you have to get below your core stat. And then there are little skills that boost that stat, that target number up higher. In order to generate these stats, I have like a whole macro for the setup in my little foundry thing. So I'll just activate the macro, just a little quick thing. Should work. Yeah. And these are all my stats thrown out in a quick macro. But of course that's the fast way that I have set up doing it. But I guess we should probably do it the slower way. The slow way is, let's see here. Well, first of all I have to do a lot of extra steps because I have to pick out my world to just my home world. Well, I decided he was from a pharaoh world. Oops, that's wrong window. Close. Yeah, there we go. So let's make him from a pharaoh world. Type this out, home world. Background. Emerald. And then spin EXP. Alright. So during the character creation process you have to pick out a home world, background, and then a role. I'll describe these things as we go. So the home world is basically, this is where your modifiers for your core stats and your character will come from. Home worlds take the place of basically race if you're playing something like some other game. So let's scroll down to Pharaoh World, which is the first result. Alright, so then the perk of being on a Pharaoh World is that your strength and toughness have a bonus to them, whereas your influence has a minus. Your fate threshold is 2, with an Emperor's Blessing of +3. Just delete that. There we go. Characteristics modifiers. Oop. Fate threshold is Fate threshold is 2 with an Emperor's Blessing of 3 plus. I'll get into that once I write everything down first. And then the home world bonus is this right here. And your starting homeworld aptitude would be toughness. Wound. It also tells you how to generate your wounds for your character. Oops. And finally, it recommends some background choices, but I'm going to ignore them for the most part. One of them is Imperial Guard. Alright, so then, let's start back at the top. What is a Pharaoh world? A Pharaoh world, if I remember correctly, is... let's go to the wiki. Warhammer 40k wiki. Pharaoh world. Pharaoh world is the imperial planetological classification for a human settlement planet whose population is comprised of nomadic hunter-gatherers, or members of a early architectural societies. These people possess pre-industrial technology equivalent to old Earth, Stone Age, Bronze Age, or early Iron Age cultures. That's from the wiki. Let's see what the books has to say about that. Pharaoh worlds are planets where the dominant culture is trapped in a primitive state, often much lower technology than that of other imperial worlds. This can range from nomadic human tribes with little more than spears and a mastery over fire, to once advanced planets now reduced to barbarism from environmental catastrophes, xenopredations, or other world-shattering events. Natives are likely to have grown up without technology and had to survive by hunting or farming with primitive tools and their own two hands. This makes Pharaoh warriors hardy, strong, tough, and able to survive the worst conditions. So I'm just going to copy and paste that last part, because that seems like the key thing about being a Pharaoh warrior is I'm hardy, strong, tough, and able to survive the worst conditions. That's the thing that seems to stand out for me for the most from my home world, is that I should probably have those key features about my character. Now we're going to go down to the characteristics modifiers. As you can see in the characteristics modifiers, the hardy, strong, tough, and able to survive the worst conditions is reflected in my bonuses. Now to roll stats, since we're on to the stat rolling phase now that we have our character modifiers, we can roll stats. So to roll stats, once again, I'm just going to quickly use this as a quick example. It's a 2d10, and then we are rolling on your modifier. As you can see, this is my strength with a plus, just like in the doc here. I have a bonus to my strength. You roll 3d10 and you drop the lowest one, and instead did it here. So then that's, if you don't have physical dice, most programs go /2d10. Alright, I got a 19. But as you can see, that's significantly lower than this. That's because I forgot the plus, which should be 20. So this would actually be /R2d10 plus 20. Oops. There we go. And now the math is done for me. Ooh, wow, I rolled worse. That's a terrible roll. Okay, so then, those are my two first stats done. I'm just going to add 20 to the first one. So then, let's go down to my stats. I'll roll the rest of them off screen, except for the ones that are modified. So then, weapon skill. Listed skill. I guess I shouldn't do that. That'll take too much time. Alright, so then let's see here. I'm gonna be, let me roll all of them actually. That way That way I can easily figure out where I want to put them. So I'm just going to use this right here now. Let's see here, 3d10, drop the lowest one, and then for the influence it was 3d10, drop the lowest one, and then you add 20 to it. That's why it's 22. So my result was a 2, and then I added 20 to it. For Dark Heresy characters, it's always add a 20 to it during character creation process, and then for only war characters, it's add 25, and then Space Marines, it's add 30. That's just to give you a quick idea of the scale you're on. Dark Heresy characters are considered to be above the average person, so that's why they get a plus 20 to your stat. So most likely, if you're an average person with something average, you're probably below a 20. So probably around the 10 to 15 range is an average person's ability, and then below that is someone unskilled in something. For an Imperial Guardsman, they're always, well, in the Only War book, they're highly trained, so they have a plus 20 to all their stats, signifying that even with a 25 to like probably 20-ish range is a skilled person, and then slightly above 25 is someone who's probably no longer like a normal, that can no longer be considered a normal person with normal skills or above average skills. So that's why at the plus 30 mark you're a Space Marine, or something is just as dangerous as Space Marine. So then, using these as my stats, I'm going to collapse this window. Oop. Now you know what? This will be faster. Let me just take a picture. Just take a picture. I'll lower that. And then I'll just post it here. There you go. These are my stats. For the most part, I'm okay where I put everything. Weapon skill is your ability to do melee stuff. I'll type this in, melee ability. The book probably puts it in a different way, but I'm going to put it this way, as I find it better to use melee for more than just I hit things better. Melee ability, this is your ability to hit something. So my melee is 31. That means my target just by itself is a 31. So I have to roll a D100 and get below a 31. If I do, I succeed and I hit my target by a number of degrees of success based on how low I got it. So I guess I'll do a quick example of that. Where's that character I made? It is right here. I'm going to go to this page, type in 31, and then I'm going to roll weapon skill. My target is 31, like I said. I have no modifiers, and I'm going to roll. I got an 85. That means I failed. As you can see, it says you failed by 6 degrees of failure. So every step of 10 away from your target number is a degree of failure. So I started at 30. I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it rounds up or something. I forget. This is why I let a computer do it for me. So that's 6 degrees of failure. Plus 1 because it's probably rounding up. Now let's keep rolling until I get a success. The thing I like about a D100 system is that it's easy to tell your odds of success. You're rolling D100, that's pretty much a percentile value. Okay, here we go. So then, this is my success roll. I rolled an 18. That's below my 31 score. That's my target number. And I got 3 degrees of success. So at 30, I'm going to count down to 10. So that's 1, 2. 2 steps, and then it rounds up 1. So that's 3 degrees of success. it always adds on 1 extra degree of success. You get 1 for succeeding, and then you get a additional degree of success for each 10 points you are away from your target number in either the positive or negative area. So that's 3 degrees of success versus 6 degrees of failure. I guess real quick, the degrees of failure. When you get a 6, that's really bad. That's pretty much a critical fail, as some system will probably put it. Degrees of failure and successes in some situations don't really change or modify anything. If you're doing a melee attack and you fail really bad, your weapon would jam if it was a gun. But as far as I remember, there's nothing about dropping your sword. But with a 6 degrees of failure, you feel free to rule that as you drop your weapon. For 3 degrees of success with a melee strike, commonly the game will say, let's see here, melee weapon is probably a D, let's go with a D5, because that might work out better. So I wrote a 2 on a D5. This is a damage for a dagger. That's pretty low, so the game allows you to swap out your degrees of success in your melee attack for the damage you did. So instead of being a 3, that would be, a 2, that would be a 3, and then I would add my strength bonus to that. That's one way of using degrees of success, mostly in combat, to swap out your damage dice, damage rolled. For other purposes, degrees of success can be used to allow players to gain an extra boon or put a bit of information to the roll. For example, let's use weapon skill. Let's say the player found a new sword and he, instead of rolling like intelligence to figure out the weapon's good or not, or commerce, I'll go roll weapon skill. As you lift up the sword and you twirl it in your hand and give it a couple practice swings, you discover with a degree of 3 points of success that this weapon is valued at this value, but it has some little problems, so you could probably negotiate the price a little lower, making your influence check to gain the weapon easier. Something like that to make it more interesting for people. So, well, I don't want to forget my things down here. So that's what I usually use weapon skill for. Now for ballistic skill, it's basically your other combat stat, does the same thing, except for with ranged weapons and ranged attacks, such as throwing weapons, shooting a gun, and in my personal home ruling, I say that you can use it to like confer information about ballistic based weaponry. So let's say you're at a crime scene trying to figure out what caused this bullet hole in this wall. My character has a ballistic skill of 27. Let's go to here, type that in. It's gonna roll his ballistic skill check, but instead of rolling it flat, I'm gonna say the thing that caused this hole in this wall is something you're trained in. All guardsmen, well, most of the time all guardsmen are trained in las weaponry, and the scorch marks in this wall was caused by a heat weapon, or energy-based weapon is their keyword for that type. Energy-based weapon caused this hole in this wall, not a ballistic weapon, so I'm going to give you a plus 10 to the roll. He's got a 16 with 3 degrees of success, so he's going to kneel down against that bullet hole and go, the bullet hole is actually skewered slightly down at an angle, which means the shooter was shooting down at the person. And this hole is more finer. It's more of a smaller, finer hole, rather than like a giant blast mark and everything's melted around it. It's more like a finer cut. Probably means it was shot by a long las. And then with the final degree of success, I'll say you turn around and you start looking towards a higher up angle and you realize there's a small little cut through the blinds in the windows. As you examine the blinds, you realize the shooter shot from outside the room, into the room, hit the target, and then it came down at an angle and slammed into the wall. And the reason why the hole is so finely cut is because it was shot by a long las. Long lasers are very precision-based weapon. They're essentially an energy sniper rifle. They're the only las gun, energy-based weapon that can take a silencer. So that's where all that little stuff came from. So that's just in my personal opinion. I would use combat stats to figure things out rather than just going, I use ballistic skill to shoot guy better. That way, people who focus on combat will still feel like they're useful in a game about investigations. And my next stat is my 35 to strength. Once again, it was roll 3d10 and drop the lowest one. The lowest one was a 5, and my two highest one was 8 and 7. Add that together with 20, and you get the 35. And I have a nice little macro set up right here. This macro probably won't work in row 20. I think you have to rewrite it, but this is essentially my Foundry macro that I found on the internet using some help from someone else. It uses a bit of the chat code, so it does have like a slight little if function, which is this question mark right here. And then as it splurges everything out, it goes, hey, which world do you want to pick? And this is the whole if function right here. It goes, which world do you want to pick? And this one right here is Pharaoh world. It's going to roll the stat like this, except for the strength, which is a 3d10. Drop the lowest one plus 20. And it also is set up to roll the wounds as well. And fate points is rolled pretty uniquely. I'm just going to grab that out of there real fast, and I'll cover that later. For row 20, I also have a macro for that. I'll be glad to share it with you as well as this one. That macro is not as fancy because I can't do all the if functions in it, and I don't really know how and don't really care to find out because I think I need a subscription for it. But essentially I set it up to also roll 2d10 plus 20, and then of course players have to, let's see, how did I do that? Oh right, yes, I set it up to roll 2d10 plus 20 for the majority of the stats that aren't modifiers, and they're not, and then there's two stats that roll 3d10, drop the lowest one, and then there's one stat that rolls 3d10, drop the highest one. So yeah, that's how I did it. Anyways, if you're interested, I'll let you know about it. So let's see here. My strength is in there. Strength is used to, let's see here. I'm a little vague on strength. No one really asks to roll strength to do anything except for to like rip open a door, but it does other stuff. Let's see here. Strength allows you to strength tests, which are stuff like, feat of strengths, like forcing something open, lifting something heavy. It also is used to increase your carry limit. And finally, the strength bonus number, which is the tens column, is to add that to your damage bonus with a melee weapon. So a quick example of a melee weapon. Let's just make one real fast. Melee. Let's just do chain. Let's do 1d5. It has a pin of nothing. Let's just roll this. Standard. So my target is 31. My damage will be 1d5 plus my strength bonus. And then I roll. That's a failure. But basically that's the concept. So that would be 1d5 plus 3. And that's my damage on my melee hit, which is a 5, but once again, let's roll a d100 and I'll show you. Let's roll a d100, and then let's give me actually, I should probably do it in here, that we can see the whole value thing worked out for you. Let's do the target of 50, as just a quick, I failed by okay, let's just boost that by like 60 or something. This is a quick example. Oops, deleted it. So let's just say that I got a 4 on my degrees of success during my melee hit. So instead of that 2 there, I can swap that out for my degrees of success. So I'll have 4 plus 3, which is 7. 7 damage. That's a little something in the rules that this system does for you automatically, because people tend to forget rules and books, and I had completely forgotten that that was a thing, that you can basically fix your damage rolls by just swapping up for your degrees of success. Let's see here. Toughness. Onwards to toughness. Well, also, once again, with strength, I would also use it as a knowledge ability, as to figure out, can someone lift this, or how strong someone would be to be able to lift this object, or for you to guesstimate, would I be able to lift this object, or would I be able to snap this thing in half? I would allow someone to use a strength test to determine that. For toughness, toughness is your soak. Soak is just like a fancy term for your ability to take damage. In this system, your soak is determined by your armor and your toughness. So with a toughness of 3, I will always be reducing all sources of damage unless the GM says otherwise by 3. If I get shot, stabbed, punched, thrown out an airlock, crashed on a planet, I will reduce the damage by 3. However, that last one, even if I reduce the damage by 3, I'm pretty sure I would be dead. So keep that in mind. Even if you reduce damage by 3, you're still going to die. So let's roll D10, and I'll give you an example. I have, let's see here. Let's say I'm getting shot at by a pistol. Pistol does 1 damage to me. My toughness is 3, so I reduce the damage by 3. That means the remainder of my silk afterwards is 2. So I take no damage. So having a high toughness is pretty good if you roll badly on your wounds, which I'll get into later. Or if you want to play someone who's air quotes tanky, or someone you don't want to die, then you want to put points into toughness. So agility is your secondary, well, is not a secondary stat. It is your second best option to staying alive. It's good to be able to take a hit, but it's also good to not get hit at all. So with an agility of 28, I can use that to perform dodge. This sheet automatically calculates everything for me. So by default, as I'll show you in a quick example, is that, let's take Charm for example. I have put nothing in Fellowship, which is the core stat for Charm skill. That's where the point comes from. It's just going to be a -20. All untrained skills are a -20. So there's no possible way I'm going to win commerce because I have a -20 on that. However, because I added my agility bonus is 28, and I added that to my dodge. So the 20, because I'm still untrained, the 20 is now reduced by my 28 in agility. So the 20 and the -20 are canceling each other out, leaving an 8. So now I have an 8 in dodge, which means I have a 8 out of 100% chance. I'm sorry, 8% chance out of 100 to dodge. And of course, that's almost impossible. But it's always worth dodging. Dodging is a reaction. You should always dodge unless you have no reason to dodge. If you're about to die, don't panic and give up and go, oh well, I'm gonna die, might as well just make a new character. No, you roll your dodge, and then you spend a fate point to dodge again if you fail that one. You'd be surprised how many times players have given up, and then I had to spend 20 minutes convincing them, no, it was more like 10 minutes convincing them to roll dodge. They roll dodge, and they're like, oh, hey, I dodged the attack. I'm gonna take a sip of water. So dodge is very important, and you should definitely get that trained. Some people like to say Some people like to argue that because their character isn't like a air quotes combat character or air quotes social character or some other archetype that's not, wouldn't have any survival skills. They like to say my dodge shouldn't really be trained up that high. I'll focus on tech use and pairing attacks or something else. I find that kind of silly concept in a grimdark future where there's nothing but war. If you can't see the attack coming, then that's a problem. If you can't dodge the attack, how is your character still alive if you literally are unable to dodge anything? That's why you should have that stat at least at trained. Oh, sorry. The states are untrained, known, trained, expert, and veteran. Since I still have a 0 and this stat right here, I'll use this example. At known, it's a 0 because it removes the -20. You now know how to do this thing, regardless of your core stat, which for charm is fellowship. So at known, it's now a 0 modifier to your core stat of fellowship would be, I haven't entered it yet, but my fellowship would be 22. So I'll enter that real fast so you can get an idea. So it's 22 now. I'm 0 back out. And at trained, you get a +10 to that stat. At expert, you get a +20. And then at veteran, you get a +30. That's how the skills work. So even if you don't have a core stat, you should never have a core stat, but this is just a quick example so you know how the math works. Your skill will rise up on its own to at least a 30. So you have at least, at bare minimum, you will have a 30% chance of succeeding at something once you become a veteran at something. So let me go back in order. So once again, agility is used to dodge attacks. There's also some talents that also use agility for stuff. Agility is also used for initiative. You roll your 1d10 plus your agility bonus to determine your initiative. I should probably throw a token on the map. Just as a quick thing. Boop. This thing I got a 4 on a d10, so that's 6 because it's adding the... Oh wow, I really have a 2 in agility? Okay. So there you go. So I added 2 to my agility, that's my initiative score is 6. Alright, on to the next stat. Intelligence. Intelligence is your main smart boy stat. Smart person stat. Smarty pants stat. Whatever you want to make fun of the stat for. Alright, so my intelligence score isn't going to be very... Well, it's a 35, which actually works out for me because I have a little character idea in mind. Yeah, okay, good. I didn't move anything. Move that 0. 35. Intelligence is for doing all the smart stuff. That's messing with machines, thinking logically about something, and a bunch of other skill-related stuff. But basically, intelligence has a whole bunch of skills that go with it in this system. So that's knowledge skills, actual crafting skills, and then for some talents, you can convert your intelligence into helping increase your soak with armor monger, which allows you to buff your gear based on your intelligence score, increasing your armor value temporarily each day for that amount, which is really good if you're a combat character who also wants to be smart, or a smart person who wants to still help out in combat and not just hide behind everyone else. And then I think in some instances you can use intelligence as a bonus to damage, but I forget which talent causes that, and I think that might just be for some NPCs. Some of them might have a special ability for that. I kind of forget. So that's pretty much the rundown of what intelligence does. It just makes you do smart stuff. I could look it up in the book real fast just to double check, but I'm pretty sure that's the only thing that intelligence is used for. Yep, recall information, figure out clues, do crafty stuff, knowledge checks, do math, win at a game of tic-tac-toe, probably, maybe chess. Alright. Next is perception. This is your ability to perceive the environment and world around you. The measure of a character's awareness and their acuteness of his senses. The character has a high perception value, can pick out a stray bolter shell casing left amidst an underhive's morass? The fuck is a morass? Or tell when someone is being deceitful. Yeah. So the last bit that I forgot about is perception is used to scrutinize someone, which is a skill. It allows you to tell if someone's lying. And perception also directly affects the skill awareness, which is used to perceive danger and figure out someone's about to shoot you. Willpower is your ability to resist being scared, basically, and also it adds to your ability to cast spells. In this game, they're called psychic powers, which I should probably say that, psychic powers. As well as if you're a blink, it helps you cast better anti-psychic powers and debuffs. So willpower, since I'm a guardsman, I should probably be pretty strong-willed, because I don't want to get suppressed, because I'm a badass and I've been shot at before, but I only rolled a 23, so I'm a pretty new at guardsman stuff, I guess. I don't know. We'll figure that out later. We'll argue that up higher later. So fellowship is my ability to converse with other people. Fellowship stat makes you the face of the party. A high fellowship stat would make you the face of the party. But personally for me, I like to argue, based on what the rulebook has sort of showed me, is that you don't just get to be the face of the party and talk all the time and to anyone, no matter what the situation is. If you're a guardsman trying to talk to a inquisitor and low gothic to his high gothic, he's just gonna go, why are you talking to me? You're a nobody and you barely know any sophisticated language. So if the face of the party doesn't pick up high gothic, or then he can't talk to someone who already knows high gothic because they'll look down on him regardless of his fellowship score alone and his charm test. And then to encourage other characters who aren't the party face to talk, I like to do the, let's see here. If you're a Death Worlder, Death Worlders are pretty paranoid people who don't really talk to other people because they think they're weird, or they're up to no good. They actually have a little thing about social situations. They feel very paranoid, extra paranoid in social situations because they don't want to let their guard down. And it seems like everyone at this party is just relaxing and drinking, but at any moment a monster could burst through the window and start murdering everyone. So the Death Worlder is constantly paranoid, checking the exits, the windows and shit, trying to make sure that he's not getting outflanked. And that they always know the exit. So when one Death Worlder, when one Death Worlder talks to another Death Worlder, they sort of click a little bit better, and they go, "Hey, yeah, hey, have you hunted this monster? Oh yeah, that thing's hard to kill, but if you strike him in this spot, then it's easy to pull off." And that will ease the tension a little bit more because now they're among their own kind. So they're like, "Oh yeah, you watch that exit while I talk to you, and then since you're facing that direction, you watch that exit, and then let's continue our conversation." So then they would get more relaxed, I guess. So your penalty to that test would be a lot lower if you had a Death Worlder talking to a Death Worlder versus the party face who probably picked probably nobility as his background, so he could up his fellowship score really high. He would have a major penalty talking to a Death Worlder versus a Death Worlder talking to another Death Worlder. So that's just my personal example of how I would rule it, just to prevent people you know, doing all the talking. And then it also encouraged other people to do some talking. How do I do that? There we go. I don't like clutter in my chat for reasons. Alright, so then fellowship is really bad. Luckily I'm not a death worlder. Otherwise I would also be paranoid about being in social situations. But I'm just feral worlder, bad at socializing. Let's see here. Last stat is influence. Influence is your ability to acquire items, services, goods, and stuff that doesn't belong to you. Other stuff that doesn't belong to you that you want. Alright, so then as there's like in the core rulebook, influence is the most spread out stat of all the other ones. It's in several different areas. There's several different rules and different ways of using it. But the main primary way people use it is to acquire a new gun, piece of gear, or armor in the acquisition section of the rulebook. But it's super easy to forget that you can do other stuff with influence. You can roll influence to basically, well, first of all, influence is not just like your cash. Influence is a summary of your money, your assets that make you wealthy, like an IOU. Let's see here. Also, your like fame in the area or fame in general. Like, hey, I'm super important, so you should give me that lasgun at this price. And I'd be like, oh yeah, sure. That's basically how influence works. Is like a combination of multiple things. So as a quick example, if I wanted, since I'm a guardsman, I want a lasgun, I'm gonna say, hey, I'm gonna roll, first of all I roll a D100 and I try to aim underneath my influence value. I'll roll it flat for now. So as you see, I fell by 4 degrees. So that means I don't get the weapon. So I'm going to, instead, I'm going to start arguing why I should get a bonus for that. So I'm a guardsman. All guardsmen should have lasguns, so I think I should get a plus 10 to acquiring it for my quartermaster. For whatever reason, I do not have a lasgun, so I should get a plus 10. Secondly, let's see here. A lasgun's availability, excuse me, is probably, since I'm literally in the, well, figuratively in the quartermaster's area inside my at my regiment's station. So the availability for that lasgun is probably super abundant, as they probably just have rows and rows of lasguns everywhere. So it's going to increase by another 20 points, making this a 30 because it's abundant. Because they have tons of them, they're basically just handing them out like cotton candy. If the Imperial Guardsmen handed out cotton candy, this would be their cotton candy, which would be a gun, and it comes with 2 clips of ammo. Alright, I got a 45. That means I successfully acquired the lasgun for whatever reason. I don't know. Let's just not tell them what happened to my other lasgun, but I have a new lasgun. Now then, with my extra degrees of success, I believe it's for every 2 degrees of success, you get an extra clip of ammo. By standard, you get 2 clips of ammo for your gun, so you actually get to shoot it and reload a couple times. So that's 3 clips of ammo in total. That's how acquiring an item with Fellowship works. But of course, if the item wasn't abundant...
No, 5 minutes.
Alright, so then. There's many different ways to increase your ability to acquire an item, and also to lower it, if you want to do that route for some reason. So, one reason, which covers all the reasons, is basically to argue to the NPC that you should give them this weapon because of this reason. And then you would pick a stat that would help you with that argument. So let's take let's take commerce. Commerce is used to negotiate prices. This is the most obvious one everyone uses. Commerce is used to negotiate a price. You roll commerce. If you succeed, it reduces the influence target required to acquire the item, or adds a modifier to your roll if you succeed. Sometimes most people just default to commerce or to charm. I am always waiting for someone to go, I would like to use ballistic skill check to like try to sweet talk the quartermaster into giving me this fancy gun because I really like guns and I know how to use them, and it would be wasted on everyone else. I'm waiting for someone to make that argument for